The Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia, between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Penn State Nittany Lions. This one appears to be one of the best games of the bowl season. Kickoff is December the 30th, noon Eastern time on ESPN. Penn State is a 3.5-point favorite in this game. The over-under set at 48.5. And when you look at this ball game, guys, the top storylines, the chance at history for Ole Miss football is really where you have to begin, guys. They got all this positive momentum right off the field with the portal and what Lane Kiffin's doing in recruiting and really building that Rebels football program. It is crazy to think, though, right? We had our good friend Zach Berry of the Ole Miss Spirit on the show last week talking about, is this the golden age of Ole Miss football? What's crazy to think about, Ole Miss has never won 11 games in a season. Even South Carolina has done that 3 years in a row, I might add. So a chance at history here for Ole Miss with everything they're doing off the field, the way 2024 should set up for them, what getting that 11th win would do for Ole Miss, what it would signify in regards to the growth of the program, the acceleration of the program, the upward trajectory, and really serving as that launching point going into 2024. Guys, the hype's already going to be out of control for Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels. But you close out this season by beating Penn State. And again, guys, I've mentioned this before. This is a really bad game for the folks out there who try to tell you bowl games don't matter. Because I tell you this, Ole Miss beats Penn State and they win their 11th game, first time in school history, winning 11 games in a season. There won't be a single person out there who's a fan of the Rebels who's going to tell you that a bowl game does not matter. And this is a big game for both programs, by the way, because these two programs are so accustomed to being the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? Not being able to win the big game. More on that in a second. Guys, I already mentioned this, but does positive portal momentum carry over? Does somehow the off-field momentum, does it carry over for Ole Miss, right? The vibes around the program are great. Now, when toe meets leather, does that really mean a whole lot? Probably not, but there's good vibes around the program off the field. You're adding these difference makers, right? They're all going to have an opportunity to watch your program and watch Ole Miss and watch what they do against Penn State, right? A brand name, if you will, in a big-time bowl game. Does this off-field momentum, does it carry on the field? And does Ole Miss play with an extra chip on their shoulder, some extra motivation, extra momentum, what have you? Going to be really, really interesting to see. Guys, I mentioned this before. A fascinating matchup between Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss and James Franklin at Penn State, because both have been really, really good at their respective schools. But the biggest knock against each of them is, well, they can't win the big game. Oh, you just can't win the big game, which, you know, I think is somewhat of a tired narrative, because it's like, I understand, right? Ole Miss has struggled in the big game, Penn State as well. But what position would you rather be in, right? Would you rather be in a position where, dang, you're just falling up short in those big games, or you never get to the big games? How about we give some credit to these two coaches for getting to the big game? With that being said, at these schools, you're not employed to just get there. You're employed to win it. So this is a big game for each respective head coach. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, James Franklin at Penn State. Who can win the big game? Because, again, these are two programs. They're so accustomed to being the bridesmaid, but never being the bride for whatever reason. Somebody's going to come out and go win a big game. Will it be Ole Miss or Penn State? We shall see. Now, guys, when it comes to on the field, how does Pete Golding's defensive attack, how do they defend against that Penn State rushing O, right? Pete Golding has done a fantastic job this year with the Rebels defense. But you look at Penn State, guys, they love to run the football. Nicholas Singleton leads their rushing attack. He's been very good. Katron Allen as well. They've really got a nice 1-2 duo back there. It's been a lot of fun to watch the way Penn State can throw people around, push people around. Drew Allar has been solid at quarterback, but I feel like he's more, maybe game manager is overly aggressive, but they lean on the running game. Let's just call it what it is. They lean on their running game. Certainly going to be a challenge. The physicality, right? The physicality of the Big Ten and what they provide on the offensive line. And can Ole Miss withstand that, right? I think Penn State's going to try to shorten the game up, limit the possessions. That's going to be a really fun matchup to watch in the ball game. Guys, also that moves into this, can Drew Allard do enough, right? Because you can't be one-dimensional. Drew Allard, the biggest gripe most people have with him when it comes to Penn State is like he was solid, but he didn't make the big game-changing plays, right? When it came to big games against Ohio State, never made that game-changing play. He was okay, didn't throw hardly any picks this year, right? But just did not make the game-changing plays that a guy like Jackson Dart, on the other hand, for Ole Miss, has made a lot this season and is capable of making. So can Drew Allard do enough? Can Ole Miss limit him? If they can limit the rushing attack, can Drew Allard lift his team and use the passing game to lead them to victory? Guys, finally is this. My final thing is this. What's the magic number in this game? Penn State has done a great job defensively. They've held their opponents to 15 points or less in 9 of 12 games this season. They have been dominant defensively. I think 20 points is the magic number for Ole Miss. I think if they score 20 points or more, I think Ole Miss has got this in the bag. I do think, moving to my prediction, locking in my pick here, I do think Ole Miss, Pete Golding, I think he's going to have a great scheme in place. I think they're going to do enough to limit that Penn State rushing attack. I think this is going to be a great game, guys. I think this is one of the top games of bowl season. There's so much on the line here on both sides. Again, you can talk about bowl games don't matter, but similar to Missouri and Ohio State, even more so in this game, there's so much to gain from a game like this, winning a game like this for each of these respective sides. Both coaches need it, right, to show that, hey, we can win the big game here. We're setting ourselves up. Both of these teams factor in or look to be in the 12-team playoff race next year. A win in this one, though, what it would do to boost that, right, and to really, boost that offseason hype, that offseason momentum going into 2024 would be massive. That being said, guys, you look at this game, it's going to be a lot of physicality. It's going to be a lot of running game. Obviously, Ole Miss with Quinshon Judkins, they want to run the football. They need to run the football. Can Ole Miss, can they match the physicality of Penn State, slow down the running game? Again, they've got that two-headed monster at the running back position. They are fantastic when it comes to running the football. How many plays can Jackson Dart make in this game? Can they have a balanced attack, if you will, in this football game? 20 points is the magic number. I think Ole Miss will hit that and then some. When it comes to a game like this, very evenly matched. You got to take the quarterback you like more. I like Jackson Dart more in this football game than Drew Allard. I think this one's going to be a classic, guys, back and forth. I think Ole Miss has just enough, guys. It feels like the stars are aligning for Ole Miss, right? You have a great 10-2 season, a season in which you only lost to Alabama and Georgia, right? The two teams that were literally in the SEC title game. You've got this offseason momentum, what Lane Kiffin and company are doing in the transfer portal. I think Penn State's a really, really, really good team. But I think the Ole Miss Rebels, I think they'll find a way. I think Jackson Dart makes more plays than Drew Allard in this football game. I think both sides are keyed on the running game. I think that is going to be the biggest difference in this one. Also, Manny Diaz, right? Penn State's D coordinator. See you, bye-bye. He is now the Duke head coach. So they've got some turnover of their own. Also, a couple of guys who have hit the transfer portal. I think Ole Miss has just enough, guys. Lock me in. I've got the Rebels 23, Penn State 20. And what I think is going to be a really fun back-and-forth ball game. But I do think Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels, I think they will do just enough to edge out the Nittany Lions and get a massive win, their 11th win, and win 11 games in a season for the first time in school history.